Today we are looking at 2 Samuel 19 to 21. And basically what's happening is a couple days ago we read about how Absalom led a revolt against David. Absalom was ultimately killed by Joab, even though David told all the army to be gracious to Absalom. He was put to death. David now has his power back, but we start off in verse 19, or in chapter 19, seeing that David is, sort of regretful of what has happened. You would expect him to be glad that he has his kingdom back, but he is not super glad.
So Absalom rises up against his own father. We talked about this the other day when we were thinking about Tamar and Amnon, and that was like a really crazy story, but it's funny how we're like moving into this new section where now Absalom is like the one that's turning on his own dad because he's like super ticked about what happened with his sister. So somebody comes along and gets rid of Absalom. So like I feel like David's poor choices up until this point have been like leading to like one disastrous moment to the next. And what was interesting for me as I was reading over this or listening to parts of it being read is that we're in this really rough situation where David is down 2 kids at this point. And Joab is like, hey, like, aren't you happy that you finally have your kingdom back? Like, you don't have to worry about Absalom anymore. Like, the Amnon situation, like, forget about that. Like, the people are back under your care. And all David can do is just be sad about it, which is hilarious because he was not real sad about Absalom before, because Absalom was the one that took away Amnon. So it's just like this really unfortunate web of just like crazy stuff. But a verse that super stuck out amidst all of the dysfunction was chapter 19, verse 6, where Joab basically says to David, like, it's kind of like a reality check, I think. He said, you love those who hate you and you hate those who love you. So it is really interesting, like this inner conflict that he constantly is having, and it's like he doesn't really realize what he has until it's gone, because he's too busy like hating on whoever it is while things are good, if you will.
Yeah, it is interesting. It actually reading over it is like, ooh, Joab, why are you saying that? Jesus says the opposite. He says we should love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. So Jesus and Joab in this chapter would be in disagreement. The structure of chapter 19 is really interesting. So a couple days ago, we saw David fleeing from Jerusalem, and he like met all these different characters as he fled. Chapter 19 is almost exactly the same story in reverse. So David's going to start meeting a lot of those same characters. They are obviously knowing that David has won this war, and so they're like, oh, David, we love you. We actually did not hate you ever. Shimei is one of the most prominent ones. Shimei is the one that was throwing rocks at David and threatening to kill him, and David chose to trust God's sovereignty and allow Shimei to just do his thing. So Shimei obviously runs up to David and is like, oh no, I support your kingdom and I will serve you. And David, to his credit, is gracious to Shimei, I think because David is trying to reunite this kingdom finally. David also makes a pretty shocking decision in that he is going to fire Joab as his commander and hire Amasa, who was Absalom's commander. This is a very, very bizarre decision. It's like Abraham Lincoln hiring Robert E. Lee to be his vice president. Seems like that would be kind of odd. But it could be that he's trying to make decisions to unite the kingdom so that people don't fight and kill each other anymore. And we do see that when he makes these decisions, the kingdom does like rally around David and his kingdom again. So we have peace for like a hot second. Everybody's kind of like supporting David finally again. And we have this short period of peace. And then Sheba decides to rebel against David.
It's just it just feels like a constant fight. But I guess at the same time, in the past, David had made that mistake with Bathsheba, which had ultimately like almost just like marked them for the future. So this doesn't surprise me, but I feel like being in David's shoes would be extremely exhausting. The amount of just like constant something, fighting, bickering, turning on each other. It's just like it's always happening.
And it's his own family. Like, it's his actual kids.
So it's not even like something that's like within his kingdom. It's within his immediate family. So it's just like it's kind of wearing to read almost. And I get why his psalms are always crying out. His little diaries of these awful, dysfunctional days.
So we do get another episode here where Sheba is leading this rebellion. Joab kills Amasa. Poor Amasa was in charge of the army for a hot second. Joab takes over control of the army. He pursues Sheba. He bumps into this wise woman, I guess, who goes in and leads people to kill Sheba herself. And so Joab returns victorious, and you get a feeling that peace has returned. But again, that peace only sticks around for a little bit, because chapter 21 is going to tell us about famine and war with the Philistines, and you get this feeling that really there hasn't been a long-lasting peace at all. Something you should know is that as we enter into chapter 21 of 2 Samuel, we are coming into the end of this book. There are only, I think, let me see, there are only 4 chapters left, actually 3, because we read 21. So there's only 3 chapters left, and these 3 chapters that we're going to read serve as an epilogue. So we kind of step out of a chronological story, and we move into just things the author wanted us to remember and know about. So the reason that chapter 21 feels like a sharp shift in how this story is being told is because it actually is. We're walking into the epilogue of the book, and this is just covering different events of David's life that the author wants you to know about.
Well, and coming back to, I was talking about Joab earlier. What's crazy is that eventually David turns on him as well. And in our study Bible, in the footnotes where I was reading earlier about this relationship between the two, where Joab kind of calls David out, eventually we get to the point where Joab is supporting Adonijah instead of Solomon as David's successor. So David basically advises Solomon to get rid of Joab, and Joab is killed because of that conversation between David and Solomon. So again, just like it continues even beyond David after he dies. There's just still this uncertainty amongst all of them, which kind of just like, I feel like splatters the next successor of Israel. Like, it's just going to keep going down the line, which is kind of sad, but anyway.
So some extra credit for those of you that have been listening for a while. You might recall that we've been doing a lot of 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles readings, but recently we haven't been. And that is because the author of Chronicles chose to omit a lot of this nasty history of David. The author of Chronicles doesn't write about the sin with Bathsheba. The author of Chronicles doesn't write about as much of all this rebellion. And it is because, we'll talk about this when we get back into Chronicles, but it is because the writer of Chronicles is trying to highlight David's reign and David's kingdom as the center of worship in Israel. And so the writer of Chronicles wants the people, remember, this is for people that are returning from exile, so they're a long time removed from David. That author wants the people to understand what it means to worship God and serve God well. And so they actually omit a lot of this sin and bad choices and bad decisions of David. It's not a whitewashing thing. He's not trying to make David seem better than what he is. He just has a different goal in mind with the book that he's writing for the audience that he's writing to. And so that's why we've been reading a lot of 2 Samuel and not much 1 Chronicles, because they don't actually line up super well at this point. So for your part today, the one thing that stands out to me, honestly, reading over these chapters, it's like, ooh, these chapters seem kind of messy and kind of weird. The one thing that stands out to me is David is certainly trying to bring peace to his kingdom at this point. His military commanders are very frustrated that he is not trying to basically kill off his opponents. Mm-hmm. He is trying to bring peace to the kingdom. And I think it is interesting, like that little line about you don't hate your enemies and you don't, how does he say that?
Says, you love those who hate you and you hate those who love you.
Yeah. So that little line, it just stands out like so stark because it is so not Jesus. Like we love everybody. We care for everybody. And in this instance, Joab, the military commander, is frustrated with David because he's not rewarding his people who should be rewarded, but also he's not executing the people who he thinks should be executed. And I think there is something to be said for the peace that David is seeking at this time. I know that David has made many mistakes and done many things wrong, but in this instance, it does stand out to me that he is trying to bring peace to his kingdom and unite his people well. And he's doing that so much so that it's frustrating to his military people. And so I think it's a good reminder for us to seek peace in whatever situation we find ourselves in. Seek resolution whenever you can. And sometimes seeking resolution is annoying to people who don't want that to happen. Sometimes seeking resolution means you're not going to divvy out the payment that people deserve. You're going to show grace. You're going to show mercy. I think about Shimei. Shimei, just a little while before he bumped into David this second time, was literally trying to kill David. And David shows him grace and forgiveness. So I think here, David is a good example of how we can be gracious to people around us. And I invite you to do that with your time today.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplанyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.